Hey everybody, welcome back to video game episode. Today I got a fun and exciting episode for you guys this Friday because I'm going to talk about why I both love and hate collecting arcade hardware. Because obviously I love the games, but sometimes the hardware can be a metric pain in the butt to deal with. And last time I showed you the Konami NWK-TR boards, we were talking about Thrill Drive, Racing Jam, and Racing Jam Chapter 2. And I was attempting a repair attempt on one of my boards, and that was unsuccessful. But everyone wanted me to loop back around on this, and I'm going to talk about what it takes to actually own some of these boards. Before I get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But when you get into the custom 3D hardware of the 90s, these boards can be needlessly complex, which means I hate collecting them because they always almost need repairs. And when it is not something popular like Sega Model 2 or 3 or some of the Namco boards, information on the ground is basically nil. Taking a look at this Racing Jam network board right here, even the security system in place was only kind of determined and figured out recently. There's not just a real-time clock chip on this board, there's also network security on some of the games. And there are only 3 games on this board, and I do own them all, but they all do something slightly different with this security. Taking a look at Racing Jam Chapter 2, the upgrade ROM kit that I have in my collection, this does have a real-time clock chip on board, but it needs to be coded because it was an upgrade kit to a different game. Trying to keep track of all this at once is just absolutely confusing, and it really takes a sort of brain to try to parse out exactly what code you need to be flashing to these boards. And you'll see here that this is coded as 888. Trying to understand all of this hardware and trying to get one working board out of all of my hardware is not an easy task, and that's why I hate collecting hardware like this. If it is rare and no one's written about the repair attempt, you basically have to make it up as you go along, which you'll either absolutely love or absolutely hate. Now, I love a puzzle. My personality's always been one that I want to try to figure out something that's never been done before, but I will say that these boards still continue to confound me in a lot of different ways. And you can see this Thrill Drive board here. That chip is in a socket, which is a very strange thing because none of the other network boards I have are socketed whatsoever, so I think maybe this has been reworked. But last time I showed this board on the channel, you'll see what happens here during the post. It is a long and needlessly complex post system that's going to check all of the boards, and this is a triple stack. You have the CPU and ROM board, and then you have 2 different 3DFX boards underneath. There are so many different things that can go wrong with these boards. They are huge, they are complex, and it checks a metric crap ton of stuff before it's either going to approve all of the checks in the post procedure and boot into the game, or if it's going to fail. And you will see here we're getting okays on absolutely everything. The device check is complete, all of the hardware is functional, the mask ROMs are good, but then all of a sudden we are going to see the following error, -11N. This is a network chip check, specifically the security key, and that's going to be a pain in the butt to deal with. But as we take a closer look at the PCB, big thanks to Andonstar. They contacted me and wanted to know if I wanted to check out one of their rework microscopes on the channel. And because I was not paid for this, nor do I have to say anything that I don't personally think, I said sure, why not, because it'll allow me to rework a lot of these Konami boards and write up some repair procedures. And taking a look through this microscope, you can see that this board has been reworked to death. There is an absolute crap ton of flux residue left behind, so I'm going to have to go through every single joint on this board, make sure that it has been reworked correctly before I try to swap out that EEPROM chip for the security coding on here. It's not going to be a fun job no matter what I do. And if you take a look down here underneath the microscope lens, this is the scale at which you need to work at to repair these things. That little dog pen there, part of the channel, is tiny, and you have to have something to magnify this. The object distance of 12 millimeters to 320 millimeters with the light is going to let me see these things better. So big thanks to Andonstar for sending this in. It is going to save me a ton of time, and if you do need something like this, there's a link below. I do not make any money off that link. It's not an affiliate. I just accept things like this when I know they're going to help me do some restoration work. Now, taking a look at the last time I was dealing with the Racing Jam board, I got this in untested, and the person that had it said they were never able to get it to boot. And that was my experience when I first got it in as well, via these photographs right here. You're going to see 7S is bad, but the thing that confused me the most was every single time I booted the board, I would get a different bad result. Sometimes 1 would be bad, sometimes 2 would be bad, sometimes 4 entries would be bad. And what I found out was at least 2 of the capacitors had damage and their solder joints had completely cracked, and that was causing some of the issues but not all of them. Now it can be a little bit tricky to get the board underneath a microscope, but as I looked through some of the other capacitors on here, this board must have had physical damage because there was a lot of cracked joints on some of the capacitors, and once I fixed all of those up by hand reworking the board, you will see here that as we turn it on, and I love that it says awakening, not just waking up, it is a funny term, it's going to go through a little bit of the post, and then we're going to jump right into the following menu. Do not touch the control device, it's trying to initialize the wheel. That means it has passed all of the post operations and our rework of the board has been effective. At least we know that it's now trying to boot, but of course without any of those devices plugged in, we can't see anything. Now my recommendation anytime you're fixing something, and this is what I love about arcade collecting, is MAME is a resource. It'll show you what the dip switches do, and you can also navigate around in software with controls you set to see what you need to do on the physical board itself. And this is going to save you an absolute metric ton of time because you don't want to start wiring up things if you do not understand how the board perfectly works. So going around in MAME, setting different buttons, seeing what you need to do, you determine that obviously the test button is just the test button, but then shift up and down, move around in the menu, and if you hit start, that's going to bring you into the actual game mode itself. So knowing that, we can take a look at the Racing Jam manual and start dealing with some wiring diagrams. Now this is where I hate arcade collecting. You better hope there's a scanned manual out there somewhere. If not, you're going to have to reverse engineer the wiring diagram and pin out yourself, which takes an absolute ton of time, and it is the absolute worst. Luckily here we can see those buttons on CN6 and on the NWK-TR filter board. If you find CN6, we can go and see what type of connector that is in the back so we know where we're trying to connect it onto the board. And this is where I both love and hate arcade collecting. I love that I have a schematic and wiring diagram for NWK-TR, but if you don't and it's not JAMA or JVS, you're going to have a really bad time. Now we know that test is on pin 12 and we know it needs a ground because it is a completable circuit, so I've wired up this DB25 port with a very cheap button so I can just see if this board is working, because just because it allows us to test the board, that doesn't mean that the test button is actually going to be working. When we get the device error here, it's asking us to enter the manual test mode, and we hit that button, and now we are in the test menu. This is further than I've ever gotten on this board, and I am so happy for this. So now I have an absolute metric mess of wiring down below. This is all just alligator clipped up as a temporary solution because I do not build any sort of permanent harnesses until I know everything is working. And this is what you're going to get into when you're dealing with repairing these type of boards. You can see I've got a mess on the table, but luckily with that wiring diagram I'm able to find where that shift up and down is, and if I hit start, somehow I end up right back in the test menu. And that's because those alligator clips are a little bit messy and I was accidentally grounding out test too much on that lead. So I'm just going to take test completely out of circuit because I'm already in the test menu. I go ahead and press start on the game mode, and finally we are into one of my 3 NWK-TR boards. Racing Jam is now fixed. It is working, you can get into the game, and now I'm able to move on to step 2, which is making a custom harness to plug this into my arcade racing wheel and pedal setup, because I have one set of controls and I keep converting those from different game to different game with adapters, so I can basically take any of my arcade racing boards out of the closet, plug them in, and get to playing. And this is spectacular, and the best part is this does work in MAME, but it does like to freeze and crash. Now that's not a knock on MAME whatsoever. It's absolutely incredible any of these games work in the first place. But this is why I love arcade collecting. I just took a board from the recycling bin, quote unquote, and I was able to bring it back to life, and now it's going to live in my main collection from this point forward. And Racing Jam is a ton of fun. I did a video on it a while back, and now that I have it working on original hardware, I will probably go back and redo the video so I can show you exactly how this game should be working, as that rear view mirror up there works off the sub 3DFX board, giving you a second view where that does not work in MAME. But this is amazing. It's a great game. It is a very rare game, and I'm so happy to be able to preserve one more board and keep it from getting just recycled, because the person that sold this to me said they tried everything and they couldn't get it to work. but I still have to deal with Thrill Drive. Now technically I could take this board and use that Racing Jam Chapter 2 ROM upgrade kit and bypass the security completely and have a bootable game. I could have both Racing Jams in my collection, but I have Thrill Drive 2 and I have Thrill Drive 3 on PCBs and they are working, so my real motivation is to try to get this Thrill Drive past that -11N network security EEPROM error and actually playable on original hardware so I can have the entire Thrill Drive trilogy at home. And thankfully with this new microscope I'm going to be able to look a lot closer at what I am dealing with, because this board still has been reworked to death and probably not done correctly. But that's why I both love and hate collecting arcade boards of this type. I love it because they're rare, they're janky 3D, and they make my heart happy. I hate it because there's absolutely no pre-existing information on how to repair them, and all of this stuff on the table just went into one repair. Now I gotta put it all back in the closet and get ready to do the wiring diagram for the steering, and this stuff is just always a mess. But I love a hot mess, I love jank, I love Konami, and I love the fact that Racing Jam is now in my collection, and it is now booting. If you want to see a part 3, leave me a comment down below. Short of that, we are done. Bye-bye.